The Gaddi are a sheep-herding community who travel in the higher reaches of the Dholadhar range of the Western Himalayas. Their traditional habitat are the slopes and forests that stretch from the high passes of Lahore to the Kangra Valley in Himachal Pradesh. In their long and arduous journeys over weeks and months, the Gaddis cover distances of hundreds of kilometers. They are completely familiar with every single pasture along the way and even know exactly how plentiful each one is likely to be. In the lap of these high mountains nestles the valley of Bharmor, popularly called Gaderan, land of the Gaddi people. The most striking feature of the Gaddi homeland is the Mount Mani Mahesh Kailash. Believed to be the abode of Lord Shiva, its presence sanctifies the origin and essence of the entire region. Shiva, it is said, created the Mount Mani Mahesh Kailash, positioning it right in the middle of this universe. Here he lives with his consort Parvati, casting a benevolent gaze on humankind. Especially towards his chosen devotees, the Gaddis. Seated at Gaderan, Shiva created a human form. From a speck of earth taken from his body, and gave it life by sprinkling water over it and blowing air into its nostrils. He called this human Gaddi. The mountains, his sheep and pastures, not only sustain the Gaddi, but are also sustained through him. The protection of sheep is why Lord Shiva created the Gaddi, and he is a nomad because the Lord himself is a nomad. He roams from pasture to pasture, from hill to hill, because his Lord has ordered him to do so. But the boon of rearing sheep was not granted easily. To first test his integrity as a shepherd, Shiva gave the Gaddi a flock of sheep to tend. The Gaddi saved his flock from the attacking bear, risking his own life. At night, when he was about to sleep, Shiva led his flock astray. The Gaddi spent the whole night bringing it together. Shiva was finally convinced and gave the Gaddi his flock and his garb. A woolen coat, chola, and belt, dora, for protection against chilly winds and snowstorms. A pair of grass shoes, poulin, to tread the difficult high passes of this rugged terrain to which he lent his name, Shiv Bhumi. This terrain has sustained and nurtured the Gaddi, providing him with a distinct territorial, cultural, and occupational identity. Shiv Bhumi stretches from Khadamukh, which lies 15 kilometers west of Bharmor village, at the meeting point of the river Ravi and its tributary, the Budhal, right up to Mani Mahesh. The Gaddi space is formed around a vertical axis of the universe, along which all the three realms, the celestial, the terrestrial, and the netherworld are located. On one end of the axis is Shiva's Kailash, and on the other end is the netherland. In between these two poles is Brahmalok, Bharmor or Gyan, the homeland of the Gaddis. Made sacred firstly as the chosen abode of Shiva, and secondly as a land situated on the Yoni basin of Shiva. This landscape is a cultural text of the Gaddis, through which they tell stories about themselves, their social relations within the community, and their relation to the divine order. Bharmor is believed to be the original capital of the rulers of Chamba dynasty. It boasts of some of the most ancient temples said to be built somewhere in the 7th century AD. These temple shrines are located in a compound called Chaurasi, said to be the sacred grove of goddess Bharmani. Chaurasi is believed to contain 84 Shivlingams, serving both as micro, meso, and macro space. The temporal world consists of 4 paths which all lead to Chaurasi. After death, the soul crosses 16 bridges to reach this courtyard at the Dharmeshwar temple in Chaurasi. The shrine of Mani Mahesh stands in the center of the Chaurasi temple complex. The Ardhaganga, or a holy pond, stands on the right, and the Kalpadrum, or the celestial wish-fulfilling tree, on the left. Dharmraj, the god of death, and Narsingh, the god of justice and incarnation of Vishnu, are situated in the northwest and north, respectively. In fact, if one were to study the conceptual plan of ancient Chamba, it too reveals a well-laid-out cosmogram, represented by 84 administrative regions or ilakas called mandalas, with 8 Shaktis or goddesses emerging from the village Chhatradi at 8 cardinal points. The center of this cosmogram is, however, not located in any one place, but at a number of centers on a vertical line starting from Saho, the lowest axis on the vertical line, Chamba, Chhatradi, Bharmor, Hadsar and Dhancho in the middle, with Mani Mahesh at the top. This vertical route with its 7 stopovers is the traditional pilgrimage route taken by Shiva on his first journey to Mani Mahesh from Kashmir. Notions of time and space are derived from the upward-downward movement of the Gaddi's main deity, Lord Shiva. Shiva resides at Mount Mani Mahesh for one half of the year. Then he migrates to Pialpur, the Netherlands, in the winter months, taking with him all living creatures. The Gaddis too migrate along with him. The Gaddi shepherd regulates the movement of his flock according to these two dates. From Janmashtami onwards, he begins to move his flock down towards Jandhar, the lower valleys of Kangra. And on Shivratri, he starts moving them upwards to Gaderan. This cyclical movement is so important to the Gaddi that it is reflected in their more sedentary existence as well, in their settlement pattern and in the way they construct their houses, which stand as if on a vertical pole. Life within the house too follows this seasonal downward, upward movement. The Gaddi houses consist of 3 stories: Chappad, Mande and Obra. In summer, the Gaddi household moves to the topmost story, and in winter it comes down to Mande, the middle story. The Gaddi economy to a large extent dependent on their travelling and their ability to keep up a regular supply of fodder. In the animal timetable, it is understood that while the higher reaches of the mountains provide more food in summer, the lower reaches have ample fodder in winter. Their journeys begin around May and could continue till November. It is a lonely life. The herdsmen spend the entire day herding the sheep, letting them linger where sufficient fodder is available. As daylight fades, they gather their flock together and settle down for the night. And each day begins like the previous one, with the herdsmen setting out early with their animals to reach the next pasture as soon as possible. The pastoralist develops an amazingly close relation to his flock, and despite the large numbers, each animal is cared for individually. The flock begins to bring forth offspring, fed on nutritious grasses of the high passes. They display their thick coats of wool. They will be sheared at Bharmor or later in Kangra. Summer is shearing season, for the sheep can do without their woolly coats in the warmth of the lower reaches. Wool has been a traditional item for barter and business for the Gaddis. While the men busily shear their animals, the women tease and clean the wool. This is the time when the Gaddi village hums with activity, with all its members back in the fold. As the weather gets warmer and the grasslands get depleted, it is time to head for the higher altitudes. As the herds reach the higher plateaus, their arrival coincides with the end of the rains. Precisely around the same time, the different Gaddi flocks find themselves at the end of their annual journeys. It is time for them to make their way back. Since they reach altitudes of up to 14,000 feet, an early onset of winter is a danger to avoid. Many are the tales of herdsmen who never came back with their sheep again. Before migrating to the lower hills, the Gaddis must make a pilgrimage to Mount Mani Mahesh. The pilgrimage in many ways recreates and replicates the first ever visit by a human being to the holy abode of Shiva. It also validates and sanctifies the Gaddi identity and their cosmology. In fact, the pilgrimage to Mani Mahesh is a ritual enactment of the entire Gaddi mythology about Shiva and their land. This takes place in the month of August, on the Radha Ashtami day, which falls on the 15th day after Janmashtami. Gaddi festivals, or Jatar, are held to honor village or family deities and focus on seasons and agricultural cycles. Folk deities and festivals are replete with rituals aimed at winning power and renewing life. The 10-day Gugal Jatar is held in many villages, during which an umbrella representing a deity called Gugdi and her brother Ajyapal or Gugga Mandlik, along with a procession of about 5 chelas of different deities, collectively known as Panchbiri, roam from village to village. They answer queries, give solutions, and remove the evil forces from the land. The Gugal Jatar falls on the same dates as the Bharmor Jatar. The Bharmor Jatar was started by the Chamba dynasty, through which the king sought to legitimize his control over the resources as well as symbolically map a territorial boundary that fell under his control. He controlled the Jatar as well as the most important pilgrimage to Mount Mani Mahesh. Each day of the 7-day Bharmor festival is celebrated as Jatar to a specific deity, and each night as Jagra to that deity. The first night is celebrated in the Narsingh temple as Thakur Janam, held in honor of Vishnu, when he emerges from the netherworld to take over from Shiva, who will go into the netherworld in September-October. The next morning is celebrated as Jatar to Narsing. Flags of shrines are replaced with new ones. Deities are offered new clothes. A flag is hoisted atop Gyaramukhi Rudra Devi Dayar, believed to be a 2,000-year-old tree. Gyaramukhi Rudra Devi Dayar is the provider of food to good and kind souls who arrive at Chaurasi after death. Sippi Chelas and Rehada musicians gather here with musical instruments, praying for protection of the lone climber who must hoist the flag on the highest branch. Each instrument they play is linked with the human body. Pawn is believed to be Shiva's daughter. Other instruments played are dhol, kal and teti. The night is dedicated to Shiva as Gaddi men and other pilgrims from Bharmor dance in his honor. It is a renewal of a bond that links the past with the future through the present. Public exorcism called Nali takes place during the Jatar. The traditional healing chants of the Nali exorcise ghosts and spirits and extract herbs from the body of an individual. A special instrument called dhuntaru, used for this purpose, is believed to be made from various limbs of Parvati's body. It is also the first instrument to be used by the first healer chanter to cure the first victim of sorcery, who was Shiva, when he was fed magical herbs by the first witch, Parvati. This entire episode is sung in the Gaddi oral narrative, Saveen. Chants and episodes from other oral narratives sung by the Jogi makes the victim go into a trance. He then begins to visualize circumstances leading to his infliction. Exact sequences and their details, right from his tormentor's first thoughts, unfold before his eyes. In the end, he whispers the name of the person responsible for the sorcery into the two gourds or Shabdghar of Dhutaru. Dhutaru Shabdghar represent the two breasts of Parvati. Then the contents fed to the person by his tormentor are purged from his body. In cases of spirits haunting the person, offerings are made to it so that it may leave. Participation in the Mani Mahesh Yatra is not mandatory, and not all Gaddis undertake the pilgrimage. But once in his lifetime, every Gaddi must pay this visit to the abode of Shiva. However, there is a group of people for whom this pilgrimage is mandatory, and they must undertake the journey every year. These are the oracles from the Sippi community, a low caste whose traditional occupation relates to weaving and tailoring. The outcast Sippi becomes the carrier of the divine substance of Shiva. They are known as Shiv Chelas, and the legend associated with their ancestor Trilochan Mahadev serves as the charter of the pilgrimage. Trilochan, a Sippi lad, was the first and the only one to have visited the abode of Shiva in human form. Shiva, posing as a shepherd, wanted Trilochan to carry a sack full of salt for him. Following the footsteps of Shiva, Trilochan jumped into the deep waters of the Dal Lake, situated at the foot of Mount Mani Mahesh. From here, he was led to Shiva's Mount Kailash, where he served as a tailor. 6 months later, taking him for dead, his relatives arranged the funeral feast, when Trilochan suddenly appeared, alive. The funeral feast was quickly converted into Nuala, a specially organized Shiv worship. Trilochan Sippi became Trilochan Mahadev, one of the many forms of Lord Shiva. The route followed by Trilochan to the Dal serves as the traditional pilgrimage route, as his journey is symbolically repeated every year during the Mani Mahesh Yatra. The Trilochan myth stresses the unity of the religious, social, and political realms in Gaddi life. On their journey to Mani Mahesh, the Chelas are given an auspicious farewell by the women of the village. They leave the village playing the pawn. From Sachuin, they enter the village of Bharmor, where they are welcomed by the villagers and offered cash and sweets. From here they proceed to the Chaurasi temple complex, which besides housing shrines to different deities, serves as the social, cultural, political and historical center of Bharmor. The Sippi sheds his everyday clothing for the traditional Gaddi garb of Chola, Dora and the Chunji Topi. The top of the cap represents Shiva's Kailash and the flaps the inner chambers of Parvati's abode. The Dora or belt represents the matted locks of Shiva and is also called Gatri, representing the goddess Gayatri, who is believed to have sprung forth from Shiva's chest. The Chola or coat represents Shiva's body. Space and time, both have to be transcended before gaining entry into Shiva's realm. Circumambulation of the Chaurasi completes the cycle of birth and death, space and time. Hereafter begins the absolute realm of Shiva, who as Chaurasi Mahadev symbolizes the transcending of space and time, of masculine and feminine, of life and death. From Chaurasi, the Chelas travel to Hadsar, then cross Dhancho, Bhairo Ghati, Gauri Kund and Shiv Karotri. After this, they cross the bridge of Pap and Punya, a passage believed to be formally open only to pious souls. Once at the Dal, they sacrifice a goat and throw its head in the lake, and then jump into the Kali Kund. Space and time both collapse here, the endless dark pit which annihilates everything that enters it. No one may enter the lake before the Chelas. No one except the Chelas may ever enter the lake at Kali Kund, or else he will be lost forever in the dark hole. The Nahaon or holy bath begins after the Chelas come out from the lake. People rush forward to be the first one to touch their bodies and partake of Shiva's divine grace. They offer prayers, sacrifice goats and sheep, and chant aloud the holy names of their deities. People surround the chelas, who answer their queries, grant them boons, predict the future, and forecast the weather. Such empowerment of the low-caste chelas helps to suspend the social order, transcend it, and return to it. Although the pilgrimage is over for some, other chelas who come from Chhatradi take holy water back for their goddess, the Shiv Shakti. The Jatar starts at Chhatradi only after the goddess has been bathed in these waters. On the last day of the Jatar, the image of Batuk Mahadev is brought outside the Sanctum Sanctorum and it circumambulates the outskirts of the temples in a procession. A dance performance takes place here. Masked dancers, known as Kappad Buddha, occupy the temple space, and they are driven back by the jeering crowds. Kappad Buddha, comprising 4 males and 1 female, symbolize the forces of decay, degeneration, and infertility. These forces are challenged by the goddess and are overcome in the battle, thus ensuring prosperity and fertility. After the performance, a goat or sheep is sacrificed to the goddess. She now comes out from the temple, marking her presence through the chela. She answers queries, showers blessings, shows distress. She laughs and she weeps, provides solutions, forecasts the weather, and so on. The men, now dressed in traditional chola and dora, join in a dance to honor the goddess. Through their dance, they enact the battle between the goddess and Kappad Buddha and the victory of the goddess in the battle. Thus, Shiva and his Shakti are both invoked to ensure the safety and fertile rejuvenation of the Gaddi land. In fact, the Gaddi mythology not only empowers the landscape with divine presence, but most importantly, it landscapes the divine. Year after year, the Gaddis continue to travel to the higher altitudes of the Himalayas and back. Despite all the changes brought on by modern life, this journey carries on as it has done for hundreds of years.